Okay, Sander, what are these interconnections that the conference will be about?
This conference is dedicated to actually the two leading political agendas, if you will, of our times. One is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is, among other things, about eradicating extreme poverty and how it is interconnected with the other agenda, which is the climate agenda. So in 2015, the world has come together and agreed on a Paris Climate Agreement, which sets long-term goals. So these processes, the Agenda 2030 and the Paris Climate Agreement, may be politically separate, but if you look at the local level, for instance, if you're a mayor, these are not separate items, these are not separate agendas. As a mayor, you have to look at what, for instance, rising sea levels does to your city, but also how it affects the livelihoods of the people. Maybe fishermen will lose their jobs if islands disappear. So how do you answer to that? And to have effective policy on that, you cannot only look at climate change or only look at sustainable development. You have to look at it as an integrated whole.
And why is this topic of interconnecting the Agenda 2030 and the climate agreement from Paris so important that we need to host a two-day conference about it?
Well, I think people don't quite realize what kind of transformation we are talking about if we are talking about a really sustainable future. For instance, the Paris Agreement states that in the second half of our century, we should have a zero carbon, a net zero carbon economy. This actually implies a completely different energy system, a completely different way of living, different livelihoods, different jobs. And we are only starting to realize what this actually means. The scale of transformation is so great that it cannot be done by governments alone. Everyone needs to be involved. And that is why, this conference is also focusing on the role of all these other actors besides governments.
What is the most exciting thing for you personally about the upcoming Interconnections Conference?
Well, I believe that the Interconnections Conference is an exceptionally innovative one. We are bringing together people from developing and developed countries, but not only from developed and developed countries, but also from different types of organizations. We have experts, academic experts, researchers, policymakers, but also practitioners who are working in the field, and we bring them together to discuss together not only theoretical problems, but also the solutions, like what partnerships can we build, for instance, to realize a sustainable and low carbon future. And that is something I really look forward to. I think too many conferences are talking about development, but if you look around in the room, it's always, very dominated by institutions from the north, from Europe and North America. And we are trying to make a difference there. So in a way, we're not only discussing interconnections, we are doing interconnections. And that is, I think, what is the most exciting part about this conference.
What are, from your perspective, the most urgent problems when it comes to addressing climate change and the Agenda 2030?
One major challenge is that at the moment, a lot of actions are taken in the developed world, in Europe, in North America, in the wealthier countries. But the challenges, the biggest challenges, are actually in the global south, in developing countries. So vulnerable communities in Africa, Latin America, and in less developed parts of Asia are already suffering severely from the impacts of already occurring climate change. But if we look at how climate investments are targeted, they don't necessarily benefit the people who need that most. So this is a very important and specific challenge we have to look at. Also, a lot of actions are aimed at reducing, for instance, emissions. And a lot of these actions are taking place also, again, in the developed countries. But it is in developing countries, and especially developing economies, emerging economies, where emissions are growing fastest. And in the future, in the near future, actually most emissions will come from developing countries. So if you talk about climate mitigation actions, they are most urgent in developing countries. So we really need to change our pace and change our strategies to make sure that action is happening where it is most needed.
What are the most encouraging developments recently?
I think it is very encouraging that a world that is usually so divided has agreed on two major political processes. One is the Sustainable Development Process, agreeing on 17 goals and 169 targets. That is a big feat. Also agreeing on the Paris Agreement, almost 200 countries that have been negotiating for more than 20 years without reaching agreement, finally reached agreement in 2015, finally agreed that the world needs to be carbon neutral by the second half of the century. I think that is a very, very big deal and very encouraging. The other thing that is very encouraging is that we're not only talking about governments, we are talking about more and more businesses, investors, cities, regions, non-state, non-governmental organizations, civil society organizations, even churches and other faith communities stepping up with their efforts. They are reducing their emissions. They are also pressuring their governments to take more ambitious action. And that is very encouraging because governments alone cannot do it. We're talking about such a big transformation. This will involve each and every one of us. Now, what is also encouraging is that a lot of these actions, they are not philanthropy. It's not that they want to do good only, but it makes business sense. Businesses are not in it, are not taking climate action or making sustainable development a reality because they want to do good. They realize that they need to make efforts to ensure their economic future. So that makes me feel very positive about this.